Hey there, I know it's been a little while, but today we're diving into the ad that I made for Halide's iPad update. I wanted to kind of break down the thought process that went into it, the pre-production, the production, and the post-production, some issues I ran into, things like that. Trying to make this a little bit of a learning experience, not only for me to kind of like think through it all, but also for y'all if you are interested in trying to shoot stuff on your own and kind of the logistics involved with that. So without further ado, I'm going to play the ad and then we will talk about it.
This is gonna be the best day ever. This is gonna be the best day ever. Wake up, top of the morning. The bacon is crispy, the coffee is pouring. My meditation is peeling an orange. The bank says I'm already scoring. I got a parking spot right outside. Step into my brand new ride. All we ever get is green lights and blue skies.
Alright, so that was the ad. I hope you liked it. Now let's talk about kind of the inception, creation of the ad, kind of the planning stages. So I was given very, very free reign as far as what I was allowed to include, what the story was going to be, things like that. The only kind of stipulations that my boss gave me were to make sure to have both live action and computer generated stuff, because we have someone who's really good at that kind of computer generated fun, very aptly like renders. And so with that in mind and that very open book as far as what I could include, what the story could be, I started planning, trying to figure out how I'm going to make this ad. One consideration I had was the music. How are we going to make sure that the music fits really, really well with the visuals? At first I kind of considered doing some sort of right to the music type thing, which I did for this film Verso a little while ago. The only issue with that is that it often will suffer in timing and pacing because of you're waiting for a specific beat, so you draw out a specific shot a little bit too long, and it just doesn't end up working too well. And so ultimately, although I did a little bit of like searching for songs at the beginning of things, I realized that I just have to do that when I'm editing, because I think it might end up being too restrictive if I just plan specifically for a specific song. Another consideration was how am I going to transition between the live action stuff and the computer generated stuff. While I had kind of considered, jumping in between the two, I realized it might get a little bit too unwieldy, kind of hard to manage, so I wanted to make them two distinct parts I could kind of think of separately. Of course, the question is how am I going to transition between one and the other, so that's something to think about. Another thing to think about was the budget, or lack thereof. Like, obviously I'm paid as an employee, but we didn't really have any money set aside specifically for this ad, so that eliminates any kind of crew, eliminates any kind of specific gear to rent. And so with all of those kind of restrictions, I had to try to figure out something. So I began to think about how am I going to make the usage of the iPad as a camera makes sense, because if it's just like you have a phone and then you pull out your iPad, that's just kind of awkward. Nobody's going to do that. The iPad would have to be out the whole time, and it would have to be a natural use of the iPad. Like, it's already out, might as well use it type situation. The iPad is often used by students for studying. I wanted to build the ad around that idea. It would also make sense because the iPad's already out, and therefore it would make sense, or some sense, to use the iPad as a camera as opposed to just pulling out your phone, right? The iPad's already out, might as well use it. So that was the idea I went with. The other thing was to shoot it outdoors because, again, didn't have any kind of crew or gear, therefore it was going to be a little bit too difficult to try to cart a bunch of gear into a location and try to shoot inside, and so thought might as well use natural light towards the evening, and I thought that would look fine, and I think it did. Alright, so to put pen to paper, or I guess text to screen, I don't really know what the digital analog would be for that, but I wrote it down in this app called Craft. I really like it, highly recommend it, but I just wrote down the basic outline of the film and kind of what shots I thought I would need. The story that I kind of had built up thus far was to basically have Lex out studying on this field of grass, reading or writing something, and then she sees a shot that kind of looks cool. She grabs the iPad, launches Halide, takes the photo, and then that photo would transform into a couple other photos and then pull back into the iPad and then do some stuff, right? So that was kind of the general outline, and now that you've seen it, it kind of makes sense. Describing it is kind of weird though, but yeah, that was the general outline I had. So now it was on to try to figure out the location, where exactly I wanted to shoot on campus, because I knew it was on campus, just not quite sure where. So now it was time to do some location scouting.
All right, so here we are on campus. It's really, really windy and probably sounds terrible. I'm not entirely sure how this is going to work, and I might just scrap this portion of the video and do it in the studio.
Yeah, actually, we are going to toss that because that sucked. The audio was terrible with the cicadas and everything, so we're just going to redo it here in the studio. There are actually still some cicadas outside my window. It is July, but hopefully you can't hear them all too well. So, location scouting. I showed up a few days beforehand and tried to figure out where exactly I wanted to shoot. I had the rough idea in mind of the general location, but not the specific spot, and so I walked around and tried to figure out a good spot. I used Artemis and Sunseeker to figure out where the sun would be and what my general frames would look like. I used the iPad to do some framing as far as what that final shot would look like, because it was important that, that final shot, which helps transition into the CG stuff, made sense. Ultimately, we didn't even actually end up using the shot that the user took at the end of the live action stuff, just because it was just easier just to use something else, and it was so fast it didn't really matter. But that was kind of one consideration I had. So I found the spot, and I thought everything was good, so we got ready for production. All right, so Sunday rolls around, and it's an insanely packed day with lots of things going on, but I tried to make the best out of it and get all the gear, or so I thought, put it in the car, we go to the event, and then we go to the university to shoot. But as soon as I get to the university, I realized that I forgot my monitor battery, which meant I can't really monitor the footage that I'm shooting. So that was already a big kind of loss. The second thing was that it was overcast, and I had seen it getting overcast as the days got closer and closer, but it was the only real day that we had available because we didn't have Lex's schedule for the rest of the week yet, and so it was just kind of like, all right, we're just gonna go shoot and see what we can do. But with all those things going on, it made it really, really just difficult to shoot, and because of the light, it was just so drab and dark and moody and not the vibe we were going for that I was just not proud of this footage at all. Like, I brought it home, cut it together, and was just not happy. So Tuesday opened up, thankfully, as a sunny day and a day that Lex was available, and so we went out to shoot it again. I moved locations just to I didn't really like the initial spot, actually, and so that gave me the opportunity to move it, as well as shoot it twice. So I shot it one time where she's reading something, the other time where she's writing something, just to have variety. And yeah, it worked out really, really well. So I shot down the Pocket 4K with the Metabone Speed Booster and the 24-70 Sigma with this Andy Cine monitor that I got from Andy Cine. It's an okay monitor. It's not great. It gets plenty bright, which is kind of all it is supposed to do. The menu system's pretty trash. You can load a LUT into it, which is nice for monitoring. I wouldn't expose off of it or do anything like that because it's not that, but you can see it outside, which is kind of all I really needed it for. And so, shot everything with that rig, and it was pretty good, and we brought all the footage home to start post-production. So I'm not the best person at backing things up, but when it comes to footage and shooting stuff, I try to be very diligent with making sure that my footage is not just in one place. Like when I get home from a shoot, whether I'm shooting a documentary or shooting a YouTube video or whatever, I always have a tiny bit of anxiety, just the footage is only in one spot right now. I want to make sure it's backed up. So I use this app called Hedge, which allows you to do backups, but also hashes on those backups to make sure that every bit of the video was copied and there's no corruption or anything like that. And so I have these 2 5 terabyte spinning drives that I will back things up to. And so highly recommend doing that. They're not too expensive. They're $150 each or something like that. And just give you kind of that peace of mind. And I labeled them just so that I have 4 of these. I have 2 similar ones. I have a SSD. I got 4 other SSDs. So it's a bit of a mess as far as drives go. So definitely try to label them if you can. But now let's jump into DaVinci Resolve and look at the edit. All right, so here's a timeline of the finished ad, and as you can see, it's kind of cut to the music. You can see the beats there when it changes, but before I had the track picked out, I first dropped the footage into the timeline and kind of assembled it together in a rough edit. I mean, the footage was already pretty much in order. I kind of just shot it in order because it was easier that way. It's not like we had multiple locations or specific setups. It was just very run and gun. But I assembled it together, and then I went looking for music. All right, so I got the music from MusicBed. Just a disclaimer, I am an ambassador, but I've always liked using their music. And so what we did here was we went to Mood, we went to Carefree, Happy, and Uplifting. And I went through and listened to these results and tried to figure out which one would sound the best, which one fit the vibe the most, and ultimately landed on Best Day Ever, as you can see here. Fantastic thing is that you can download not just the song, but also the instrumental version, which I actually ended up using. So let's jump back into Resolve and take a look at that. All right, so I first just dropped the entire track into here, and whoops, I don't want to mute it. And it worked, but the problem was we didn't have a ton of footage, and the CG stuff, each shot takes a long time to render, but also just to plan and figure out. So that meant that we had to shorten it. And the cool thing about an instrumental track is that's the exact same as a normal track, just without the lyrics, which meant I could chop it and make it fade out without fading out on lyrics. And so that's exactly what I did. Right here, it goes from the normal track to the instrumental one. So first, let's real quick drop this down here and pop this out, disable these, and here's what it sounds like. It goes right back into that this is going to be the best day ever. Problem was, if we kept going, it would end and it would be in the middle of some lyrics. And so I went through and just lined these up and chopped it where it doesn't do that. It doesn't say this is going to be the best day ever for another time. So now there's no lyrics there. So that was really nice and really handy to be able to modify the track in that way and make it fit the film exactly how I needed it to. All right, so real quick to touch on color. I am no colorist by any means, but I used Juan Milara's Kodak 2393 film print emulation thing, and it worked just fine. Yeah, nothing really special here. We used highlight recovery because it kind of got a little hot in the background. Couldn't really do much about that because I'm, again, not a colorist. I need to learn more about it, but I currently don't. Anyway, so yeah, it worked for what it needed to be. We're not like showing this in a movie theater or anything like that, and people are watching it on their phones. So yeah, that was color in the briefest of sense. All right, so real quick to touch on the CG stuff, because that is a very big component of this ad. I was not the one who rendered these out. I am not good at CG, but we have someone named Martijn who is fantastic at this stuff, and he's just a genius. But he was busy doing stuff for, still part of the launch, but for like the website and renders for that. And so, in the meantime, I made a couple quick renders in Blender just to kind of help him get an idea of what I was going for. So this was about the raw thing. This was about the manual focus dial. Oh, that got glitchy. That was weird. Yeah, so I just sent these over to him. I was like, this kind of, it needs to show the raw thing. Show that. This needs to show the manual focus dial. Like, I needed specific shots. I needed them to be long enough so that I could kind of trim them and have a little bit of play to them as far as the edit goes. And so he went and did that, came back with some amazing stuff, much better than mine, and made all of this beautiful work. And I cut it together, and that was pretty much that. Then we went out to this nice little animation for the highlight thing, and then to the Lux logo thing. So that was pretty much the ad. All right, well, that was the film. That was the ad. Film probably is a bit generous, but I hope that was interesting. I hope that was helpful. I know I definitely learned some things, and it was helpful for me just to look back at the entire process. It's been a couple months now, and that gives me that separation, and then looking back gives me kind of perspective on what I can do to change and improve. For me, I think one small thing I could change would be to, or improve on, would be to make a better checklist of gear to grab before I head out, because not bringing that monitor battery really wasn't smart. A bigger thing though for me is just to work on developing a better story. I know, ultimately the video was just about the product, and I think good ads can serve two purposes, not just selling the thing, but also having some sort of engaging story. And obviously with the time constraints, with the style, the shorter Apple ads don't necessarily connect you with a specific person and you're emotionally attached. But I think I have a lot of room to improve in that area, and so that'll be interesting to explore next time I make another ad or work on another film. So yeah, I learned a lot. Hope you did too. Feel free to subscribe if you want, and I would love to hear if you learned anything interesting. Just drop it down in the comments. I'd love to have a little dialogue and conversation, and hit me up on Instagram if you want, or Twitter. And yeah, I'll see you when I make another video, which might be a couple months, might be a couple weeks, or a couple days. I don't know. Probably not a couple days, but maybe a couple weeks. We'll see.